I didn't think the moment my relationship started dying would happen in a hotel hallway that smelled like sunscreen and stale alcohol. Not with screaming, not with a slap, not even with a dramatic confession. It started with a lie, delivered over breakfast, while my boyfriend's hands were still warm from holding his coffee mug. 3 days ago, I thought everything in my life was finally steady. I'm Hannah, I'm 29, and I've been with Ethan, 25, for a little over 14 months. The kind of relationship that feels safe. The kind where you start noticing wedding rings on other people's hands and wondering when it might be your turn. Ethan and I weren't perfect, but we were real. We laughed easily. We made plans without checking our tone first. We talked about the future like it belonged to us. But there was one crack in our foundation, one mistake I made early on that Ethan never fully forgot. A few months after we started dating, we had a stupid argument. I don't even remember what it was about anymore, just the feeling of anger sitting under my ribs like a hot stone. After he left my apartment that night, I got drunk and did something ugly. I messaged a few men on social media, fishing for attention like it could patch the hole in my pride. Nothing happened. I never met anyone. I didn't sleep with anyone. But Ethan saw the messages later, and the look in his eyes that day, hurt mixed with disappointment, became a shadow that followed us ever since. He stayed. I promised. I changed. And I meant it. That's why what happened on this vacation feels like a cruel joke. We went to a beach resort with friends. Sun, pool, dinners, that fake paradise energy, where people post smiling photos while real life waits off camera. With us was Luke, Ethan's best friend since childhood, his like family person. Ethan lost his older sister in a car accident when he was 11, and Luke filled that empty space the way only history can. Luke wasn't just a friend. He was a piece of Ethan's survival. So when I saw Luke at the hotel bar, laughing too loudly, slurring, surrounded by strangers buying him drinks, I didn't roll my eyes and walk away. I did what I thought a decent girlfriend should do. I checked on him. I offered to help him get back to his room. And in a quiet hallway, under dim lights and carpet that swallowed sound, Luke backed me against the wall and tried to kiss me. I still remember how my stomach dropped, how my skin went cold, how my brain stuttered like it couldn't load what was happening fast enough. I pushed him away. I said no. I said Ethan. I walked away. And I made one terrible decision. I didn't tell Ethan that night. The next morning, Ethan cried on the edge of our bed and told me Luke said I tried to come on to him. I opened my mouth to defend myself and watched Ethan's trust shut like a door. Because why would he believe me? A girlfriend with a messy past? Or the best friend who helped hold his world together when his sister died? By lunchtime, Ethan had moved his things into Luke's room, and our friends were looking at me like I was already guilty. Everyone keeps saying, if you're innocent, the truth will come out. But sitting alone in that hotel room, with the sound of laughter drifting in from the pool, I realized something terrifying. Sometimes the truth isn't enough when the people you love are already trained to doubt you. And I could feel it, like a slow, sickening slide. That I might be about to lose Ethan forever. Not because I betrayed him, but because I tried to protect his best friend from making a fool of himself. If you asked anyone who knows me to describe the kind of woman I am, they'd probably say something like intense but loyal, or strong until she's hurt. The truth is, I've always been the kind of person who tries to do the right thing even when it costs me comfort. I'm Hannah, 29, and I work as a project coordinator for a mid-sized marketing firm. Nothing glamorous, but the kind of job that rewards being organized, calm under pressure, and quietly competent. My days are spreadsheets, timelines, client calls, making sure everyone else's chaos doesn't leak into the final product. I'm good at it because I learned early how to keep my emotions tidy on the outside, even when the inside is loud. That habit didn't start at work. It started in my 20s, after I learned the hard way that people can love you and still disappoint you. It started the first time I realized I could be lonely while lying next to someone. It started the first time I ever did something I wasn't proud of. Like that night, I messaged other men just because I wanted to feel wanted. People think cheating is always about desire. Sometimes it's about insecurity. Sometimes it's about wanting to win a fight you already lost inside your own head. And when Ethan found those messages, I saw exactly who I was in his eyes. Not a villain, but a risk. A beautiful risk he didn't know if he could afford. The strange part is, he still stayed. I met Ethan at a friend's birthday dinner, one of those nights where the restaurant is too loud, and the lighting makes everyone look a little kinder. He wasn't the kind of man who tries to dominate a room. He had that quiet steadiness that makes you lean in without realizing it. When he laughed, it wasn't performative, it was real. When he asked questions, it wasn't to impress. He actually listened to the answers. I remember the first time we talked one-on-one. We were outside the restaurant, waiting for our rides. The air smelled like rain on hot pavement, and he offered me his jacket without making it a big gesture. He didn't flirt like a man collecting points. He spoke like someone who didn't need to prove anything. And I, who had dated men that felt like storms, found myself craving his calm. Our relationship built slowly, like we both respected the idea that something fragile was forming. We didn't rush to label things. We didn't post each other online in the first month. We went on simple dates, coffee shops, weekend hikes, grocery runs that turned into cooking dinner together in his tiny kitchen. I learned the way he always hummed when he was concentrating. He learned the way I got quiet when I was overwhelmed. For a while, it felt like we were building something safe. But safety doesn't erase old wounds. Ethan had his own history. His sister's death wasn't just a sad fact. It was a shaping event. He lost her when he was 11, 19 years old, car accident. One day she was there, teasing him, stealing fries off his plate, and the next day she was a framed photo on a dresser and a silence in the house that never fully left. That kind of loss does something to people. It makes them cling harder to whoever stays. And that's where Luke comes in. Luke was Ethan's best friend since elementary school. The kind of friendship that isn't just close, it's fused. Ethan didn't talk about his sister often, but when he did, Luke's name always appeared somewhere in the memory. Luke was the one who sat next to him at the funeral, the one who distracted him in class when the grief made him stare too long at nothing. The one who kept showing up when most kids didn't know what to do with a grieving boy. Ethan once told me, very quietly, Luke is the reason I didn't fall apart. How do you compete with that? How do you question someone who has the status of a life raft? At first, Luke and I were fine. Not warm, not hostile, just a careful neutrality. He was charming in a way that felt practiced. Quick jokes, loud confidence, always the center of a circle. I'm not naturally drawn to that type, but I tolerated it because Ethan loved him. Luke would tease Ethan with that brother energy, and Ethan would light up in a way that made me feel like I was seeing him younger, freer. But there were moments, little ones, that didn't sit right. Luke would talk over me sometimes, like my sentences were optional. He'd make jokes that landed a little too sharp, then glance at Ethan like, see, I'm just kidding. If Ethan and I had a plan, dinner, a movie, a weekend away, Luke somehow always had something going on that needed Ethan's attention. And Ethan would always answer. Not because he loved Luke more than me, but because guilt is a leash, and Luke had been holding one end of it for years. I tried to be mature about it. I told myself, this is what it looks like when someone has history. Don't be jealous. Don't be dramatic. Don't make him choose. So I played the role of the understanding girlfriend. And maybe that's why Luke never thought I'd fight back. Maybe that's why he felt comfortable being messy. Then came the mistake, my mistake. That night, after our argument, when I got drunk and messaged other men, I remember waking up the next day with a headache and a sick feeling in my stomach, staring at my phone like it belonged to a stranger. I deleted everything. I told myself it was just a stupid spiral, but Ethan saw. And when he confronted me, he wasn't loud. He wasn't cruel. He was calm in the worst way, like disappointment had already drained all the emotion from his voice. Why? He asked. I didn't have a good answer. I had a messy one. I was angry. I was insecure. I wanted attention. I didn't think. He looked away like that last part hurt him most. I don't want a relationship where I have to wonder, he said. I remember crying, not in a dramatic way, but in that silent, humiliating way where your body betrays you and you can't stop it. I promised him it would never happen again. And it didn't. For over a year, I did everything right. I was transparent, I was steady, I was loyal. I built myself into someone I could respect again. Ethan seemed to forgive me, but forgiveness isn't always the same as forgetting. That crack stayed there, invisible most days, until something heavy pressed on it. Which brings us back to the vacation. It was supposed to be a reset. Sunlight, salt air, laughter, a break from work and routine. Ethan was excited in a way I hadn't seen in months. He talked about how much Luke needed this trip, how Luke had been stressed lately, how they all deserve fun. I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to feel like we were a team. So when I saw Luke at the bar that night, Too drunk, too reckless, surrounded by strangers. I didn't think, not my problem. I thought, that's Ethan's family, and Ethan is mine. I walked over with the easiest smile I could manage, made small talk, and kept one eye on Luke's glass. The men with him were friendly enough, but there was a predator's patience in the way they kept refilling his drink. Luke's laugh was louder than necessary. His cheeks were flushed. His words stuck to each other. I leaned down and said softly, "Hey, do you want to head back soon?" He blinked at me, like focusing took effort. Then he grinned. "Yeah," he said. "You're cool, Hannah." Like I'd just passed a test. I didn't realize in that moment he might take my kindness and twist it into something else, because I still didn't think the worst. I still thought being decent would protect me. It didn't. The hallway was quiet in that way hotel hallways always are. Too quiet, like the building itself is listening. The carpet was thick enough to swallow our footsteps. The lights were dim and warm, meant to feel relaxing, but they made everything slightly unreal, like we were walking through a set instead of a real place. Luke walked a half step behind me, humming under his breath. I could smell alcohol on him, sweet, sharp, unmistakable. I pressed the elevator button and waited. That's when he moved closer. At first, I thought it was accidental. People drift when they're drunk. I shifted slightly, giving him space. The elevator still hadn't arrived. The numbers above the door glowed red and unmoving. Then Luke's hand brushed my arm. Not a stumble. Not a balance check. A deliberate touch. I turned, confused, more than alarmed. "You okay?" I asked. He smiled at me, but it wasn't the familiar grin he wore around Ethan. This one was slower, assessing, like he was testing something. "You're really hot, you know that?" he said. The words landed wrong. Too intimate, too close. My stomach tightened. "Luke," I said carefully, "you're drunk." He laughed and stepped closer, backing me toward the wall without fully realizing it. The hallway suddenly felt narrower. "So," he said, "you think Ethan's perfect?" I felt the cold of the wall against my shoulder blades. "Stop," I said, my voice firmer now. "I'm with Ethan, and you're his best friend." For a split second, something flickered in his eyes. Embarrassment, maybe. Or anger. Then his hand pressed flat against the wall beside my head. "I won't tell if you don't," he slurred, leaning in. That was the moment my shock snapped into clarity. I pushed his chest, not hard enough to hurt him, but enough to create space. "No," I said. "This isn't happening." I stepped sideways, out from between him and the wall. My heart was pounding so loudly, I could feel it in my throat. Luke frowned like I'd offended him. "Relax," he said. "I was just joking." "No, you weren't," I replied, "and this is done." I didn't wait for the elevator. I turned and walked down the hallway toward the stairs, my hands shaking, my brain already replaying the moment like a loop I couldn't shut off. Behind me, Luke called out my name. Too casual, too familiar, but I didn't turn around. I went straight back to my room. When I opened the door, Ethan was lying on the bed, scrolling through his phone. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. "Got the wine?" he asked. And there it was, the choice I made that would cost me everything. I said yes. I poured us glasses. I sat beside him. I let him talk about the ocean view and the dinner plans for tomorrow. I nodded and smiled and tried to act like my skin didn't still feel wrong, like I hadn't just been pressed against a wall by the person he trusted most. I told myself I was protecting him. I told myself Luke would wake up embarrassed and never mention it again. I told myself it would only cause pain to bring it up now, in the middle of a vacation meant to heal. But silence has a way of choosing sides. The next morning, I woke to sunlight slicing across the bed, and Ethan sitting on the edge of it, fully dressed. His shoulders were tense, his hands were clenched. I knew something was wrong before he even spoke. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. I sat up, my pulse spiking. "Tell you what?" He turned to face me. His eyes were red, not from sleep, but from crying. "Luke told me everything," he said. My mouth went dry. "What did he say?" Ethan swallowed. "He said you got jealous at the bar, that you didn't like him talking to those guys, that you followed him into the hallway and suggested you two go somewhere more private." I stared at him, the words barely registering. "That's not true," I said immediately. "Ethan, he came on to me. I pushed him away. I walked off." Ethan's face didn't change. That was worse than anger. "That's not what he said," Ethan replied. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away like my touch burned. "Please," I said. "I swear to you, I would never do that. Not after—" "After last time?" he interrupted. The room felt like it tilted. "I know what I did before," I said, my voice breaking, despite my effort to stay calm. "And I've spent every day since proving I'm not that person anymore." Ethan looked down at the floor. "That's the problem," he said softly. "I don't know who to believe when both of you sound convincing." The sentence landed like a verdict. He stood and started packing a small bag. "I'm staying in Luke's room for the rest of the trip," he said. "I need space." I felt like I was underwater, my movements slow and clumsy. "You're choosing him?" I asked. "I'm choosing what makes sense," he replied. "Luke was never lied to me, and you have." That hurt more than the accusation itself. He left without slamming the door. By noon, the story had spread. Friends stopped making eye contact with me. Conversations went quiet when I walked into shared spaces. Someone I barely knew gave me a look that held both pity and judgment. I ate lunch alone. I lay by the pool alone. I watched people laugh and swim and post photos of a vacation I was no longer part of. And the worst part? I understood why Ethan believed him. That's what made it unbearable. Because Luke didn't just plant a lie. He planted it in soil already cracked by my past. And it grew fast. That night, lying alone in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned and turned, I realized something chilling. This wasn't just about one lie. This was about who people decide you are when it's convenient for them. And I had a terrible feeling the worst was still coming. The real damage didn't happen in the hallway. It happened the next evening, when the lie stopped being a rumor and became my reality. By the second night, Ethan wasn't just distant. He was gone. He avoided the hotel room entirely, leaving only the faint smell of his cologne behind, like a ghost of what we used to be. His toothbrush was missing. His phone charger was gone. Even the little notebook he always carried had disappeared from the nightstand. I stared at the empty space where his things used to be and felt something hollow open up in my chest. Around 7, I got a text from one of the girls in our group. "We're all having dinner by the beach. You can come if you want." The words "if you want" felt like a courtesy, not an invitation. I debated staying in the room. Hiding felt easier. But there was a quiet part of me that refused to let the story end without my voice in it. I showered, changed, and walked down to the beach restaurant alone, every step feeling heavier than the last. The table was long, too long. Ethan sat near the middle, Luke beside him, leaning back comfortably, arm draped over the chair like he owned the space. When I approached, conversation slowed, not stopped, just dulled, like a radio turned down. I took a seat at the far end. No one asked me how I was. Halfway through dinner, Luke laughed loudly at something someone said, then casually rested his hand on Ethan's shoulder. It was an intimate gesture, possessive. And something in me snapped, not into rage, but into clarity. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't drunken confusion. This was control. I stood up so suddenly my chair scraped against the sand. "I need to say something," I said. The table went silent. Ethan looked up at me, his expression guarded. "Hannah," he warned quietly. "No," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm done being quiet." Luke tilted his head, lips curling slightly. "This probably isn't the place." "It's exactly the place," I said, "because you lied to everyone here." A few people shifted uncomfortably. I turned to Ethan, forcing myself to meet his eyes. I did not come on to Luke. He came on to me. In the hallway. I told him no. I walked away. Luke scoffed. "Wow." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't act surprised. You know exactly what you did." Ethan rubbed his face, exhaustion etched into every line. "Hannah, stop. You're making this worse." That hurt more than if he'd yelled. Luke leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I didn't want to say anything," he said, voice smooth and regretful. "But she's twisting things. She was drunk. She was upset. I tried to calm her down." My hands were shaking now, but I kept them at my sides. "That's not true." Luke sighed theatrically. "I think you're projecting. After what happened early in your relationship, I get why Ethan's confused." That was the moment. The moment I realized he wasn't just lying. He was weaponizing my past. I felt heat rush to my face, not from shame, but from anger. "You don't get to use my worst moment to cover up your own behavior," I said. Luke's mask slipped, just for a second. His jaw tightened. His eyes flashed. Ethan didn't see it. He stood up abruptly. "Enough," he said. "This is done. I can't deal with this right now." He looked at me, and for the first time since this started, there was something final in his gaze. "I need space," he said. "Real space." Then he turned and walked away. The table slowly resumed talking, but it wasn't the same. No one followed me when I left. No one checked on me. I walked back to the hotel alone, my chest tight, my breath shallow, like I'd run miles without moving. Inside the room, I sank onto the bed and stared at the door. I didn't cry. I shook. I replayed every word, every look, every choice I'd made since the hallway. I wondered if I should have screamed, if I should have recorded something, if being calm had made me look guilty. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. I'm flying home early tomorrow. We'll talk when we're back. That was it. No, I'm sorry. No, I believe you. No, I love you. Just a countdown to the end. I lay there listening to the ocean outside, a sound that should have been soothing, but felt mocking instead. And somewhere between the sound of the waves and the hum of the air conditioner, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't about proving my innocence anymore. This was about whether the man I loved was capable of seeing me clearly, or if my past mistake had permanently rewritten who I was in his eyes. That night, alone in a hotel room meant for two, I felt the relationship begin to die. Not loudly, not dramatically, but slowly, like a quiet suffocation. The flight home felt longer than it should have. Not because of turbulence or delays, but because every minute in the air was filled with questions I couldn't shut off. I sat by the window, forehead resting against the cool glass, watching clouds slide past like indifferent witnesses. Ethan sat 3 rows ahead of me. I knew because I could see the back of his head when I leaned slightly into the aisle. He didn't turn around once, not at boarding, not during the flight, not when we landed. That silence hurt more than any argument we'd ever had. When we got home, he didn't invite me inside. He set his bag down by the door, took a breath, and said, "I think we should take a break." There it was. Not a breakup, not forgiveness. A holding pattern where nothing heals and everything hurts. I nodded because arguing felt pointless. "Okay," I said. He hesitated, like he was waiting for me to fight harder. But I didn't. I'd already fought in a hallway, at a dinner table, in my own head. I went to my apartment and closed the door behind me. The silence there was different. Heavy. Personal. I slid down against the door and finally let myself cry, shoulders shaking, breath uneven, the kind of crying that comes from being misunderstood rather than unloved. Because I still believed he loved me. That was the problem. The next few days blurred together. I went to work. I answered emails. I smiled in meetings. On the outside, I was functional. On the inside, I was dismantling every memory of us, looking for clues I'd missed. I asked myself the same questions over and over. Should I have told him immediately? Did my hesitation make me look guilty? Was I protecting him or protecting myself from conflict? At night, my phone stayed face down on the nightstand. I didn't want to see his name pop up only to disappear again. I didn't want hope unless it came with certainty. On the 3rd day, I broke. I called him. He answered on the 2nd ring, like he'd been waiting. "Hey," he said. His voice sounded tired, older. "I need you to listen," I said, my voice calm but shaking underneath. "I'm not asking you to forgive me for the past. I know I earned that doubt, but I need you to understand something about now." There was a pause. "I'm listening." "Luke lied," I said, "and I know you don't want to believe that. I know it feels easier to believe I messed up again, but I need you to ask yourself why he'd do that." "I have," Ethan replied, "and I don't see a reason." "That's because you don't want to," I said gently. "Because if Luke lied, then everything you trust falls apart." He exhaled slowly. "You're asking me to choose between you and the person who helped me survive my sister's death." "I'm not asking you to choose," I said. "I'm asking you to look." Another silence, this one heavier. "I don't know how," he admitted. That confession hit harder than anger, because it meant he wasn't refusing out of cruelty. He was refusing out of fear. "I don't expect you to decide anything today," I said, "but I can't live in limbo forever." "I know," he replied quietly. We hung up without resolution. That night, I sat on my couch, staring at the dark TV screen like it might give me answers. Instead, my phone buzzed with a message from someone I didn't expect. Jason, Ethan's friend, the one who'd been on the trip. "Hey, can we talk?" I hesitated before replying, then typed, "Sure." He called almost immediately. "I want you to know something," he said without preamble. "I believe you." I closed my eyes, relief washing over me so fast it made me dizzy. "Thank you." "There's more," Jason continued. "I've noticed things about Luke for years, stuff that bothered me, but I never said anything because, well, you don't mess with someone's grief." My heart started pounding. "What kind of things?" I asked. Jason hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "The way he undermines Ethan, the way he positions himself as the only one who really knows him, the way he reacts when someone else gets close." I thought of Luke's hand on Ethan's shoulder, the casual possession. "He does it subtly," Jason said. "Makes Ethan doubt himself. Makes everyone else look temporary." I swallowed. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I saw Luke that night," Jason said. "Not in the hallway, but at the bar earlier. He was watching you, and when he came back alone, he was angry. Not embarrassed. Angry." The pieces shifted. Not settled, but shifted. "I don't think this was a drunken misunderstanding," Jason said quietly. I think Luke felt threatened, and I think he decided to remove you. I felt cold. Jason continued, I'm willing to say this to Ethan, with you there, if you want. I stared at the wall, my reflection faint in the dark window. For the first time since the vacation, I felt something other than fear. Resolve! Okay, I said, let's talk to him. Because I was done shrinking to make lies more comfortable. And whether Ethan chose me or not, the truth deserved to be heard. We met Ethan at a quiet cafe near his apartment, the kind of place where conversations feel safer because everyone around you is minding their own business. Soft music played overhead, and the smell of coffee clung to the air, grounding me as my nerves threatened to spiral. Ethan arrived first. He sat stiffly at a small round table, hands wrapped around a mug he hadn't touched. When he saw Jason walk in with me, his expression shifted. Confusion first, then guarded suspicion. What's this? Ethan asked, his tone careful. I asked Jason to come, I said. Please, just listen. Jason pulled out a chair and sat across from Ethan, leaning forward. I'm not here to attack anyone, he began. I just need to say some things I should have said a long time ago. Ethan's jaw tightened. If this is about Luke, it is, Jason said calmly, but not in the way you think. I stayed quiet, my hands folded tightly in my lap. This wasn't my moment to convince. It was my moment to let the truth stand on its own. Jason spoke slowly, deliberately. He talked about patterns, small things that added up over time. How Luke always positioned himself as Ethan's emotional anchor. How he subtly dismissed Ethan's relationships, not just with me, but with anyone who got too close. How Luke framed concern as protection and loyalty as exclusivity. Ethan shook his head. You're overthinking it. I thought that too, Jason replied, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. He described specific moments, missed plans, last-minute emergencies, jokes that landed a little too cruel. He mentioned how Luke always seemed threatened when Ethan started building a life that didn't revolve around him. I watched Ethan's face as the memories surfaced. I could see it, the flicker of recognition he didn't want to acknowledge. Then, Jason said the thing that tipped the room. I saw Luke that night, he said, after you two left the bar. Ethan's eyes snapped up. What? He came back alone. He wasn't embarrassed. He was angry. He said you were naive and that Hannah was playing games. My breath caught. I didn't think much of it at the time, Jason continued, but now it fits. Ethan leaned back, running a hand through his hair. Why wouldn't you tell me this sooner? Jason didn't flinch. Because your sister died and Luke was the one who stayed, and no one wants to be the person who questions that. Silence stretched between us. Ethan looked at me then, not with accusation, but uncertainty. Why didn't you tell me right away? He asked quietly. I met his eyes. Because I was afraid, I admitted. Afraid of hurting you. Afraid you'd think I was causing drama. Afraid you'd believe him anyway. That fear cost us, he said. I know, I replied, and I'll carry that. But I didn't lie. The conversation didn't end in clarity. It ended in fracture. Ethan asked for time. More time. He said he needed to talk to Luke. Alone. That terrified me. Because if Luke sensed control slipping, he wouldn't let go quietly. And I was right. 2 days later, my phone exploded with messages from mutual friends. What did you say to Ethan? Luke is really upset. You should have let this go. Then Luke called me directly. I almost didn't answer. Almost. What are you trying to do? He snapped, his voice stripped of its charm. I'm telling the truth, I said. You're tearing Ethan apart, Luke hissed, after everything I've done for him. You don't get to own him, I replied, my hands shaking. There was a pause, then he laughed. Short, sharp. You think this ends well for you? The line went dead. That night, Ethan came to my apartment unannounced. His eyes were bloodshot, his posture was rigid. He admitted part of it, Ethan said. My heart skipped. Part of what? He said he was drunk. He said he misread the situation. Ethan's voice cracked. But he also said you led him on, that you didn't shut it down clearly. I felt something break open inside me, not pain, but fury. He's still lying, I said, and now he's doing it because he knows you're wavering. Ethan covered his face with his hands. I don't know who to trust anymore. That was the real escalation. Not shouting, not accusations, but the collapse of certainty. Friends took sides. Some avoided me. Others whispered apologies they weren't brave enough to say out loud. Luke positioned himself as the wounded hero, the loyal friend being falsely accused by a girlfriend with a history. And me? I became the woman who was technically innocent but still emotionally inconvenient. I felt myself changing. Not hardening, sharpening, because I could feel it now, deep in my chest. This wasn't just about saving my relationship. This was about reclaiming my reality. And I wasn't done yet. The night everything went quiet was the night I finally stopped fighting the silence. Ethan didn't text. He didn't call. He didn't show up. 3 days passed like that. At first, I kept my phone close, on the table, in my hand, beside my pillow, jumping every time it vibrated. By the second day, I stopped checking. By the third, I turned it face down and left it there like it had betrayed me too. This is what people don't tell you about heartbreak. It isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just absence. I still went to work. I still answered questions. I still smiled when people smiled at me. But my body felt disconnected from my thoughts, like I was operating myself from a distance. My coworkers noticed something was wrong, but no one pushed. Adults are polite like that. We give each other space to quietly fall apart. At night, the apartment felt too big. I slept on one side of the bed, even though no one was coming back to fill the other. I caught myself listening for sounds that weren't there. Keys, footsteps, Ethan's voice calling my name like he used to when he came in, tired and happy to see me. Nothing came. On the fourth night, I finally cried. Not the kind of crying that releases something, but the kind that drains you. The kind where your chest aches afterward and your head throbs like you've been holding your breath too long. I curled up on the couch with my knees pulled in and let myself feel it all at once. The humiliation, the grief, the helplessness. I kept thinking, I did everything right this time. I didn't flirt, I didn't lie, I didn't cross a line. And still, I was being punished for who I used to be. That's when the thought crept in, quiet and dangerous. Maybe this is all I'll ever be to him, a risk he was never willing to fully trust. My phone buzzed once. A message from Ethan. I need space, I can't do this right now. That was it. No timeline, no reassurance, no promise that space wouldn't quietly turn into goodbye. I stared at the message until the words blurred. Something inside me finally gave up, not on him, but on waiting. Because waiting felt like begging. The next morning, I woke up exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were dull, her shoulders slumped like she'd been carrying weight that wasn't hers. I whispered out loud, I didn't deserve this. And for the first time, I believed it. That was my lowest point. Not because I felt weak, but because I realized how long I'd been measuring my worth through someone else's belief in me. Ethan might never fully trust me again. Luke might walk away without consequences. Our friends might quietly rewrite the story to make it easier to digest. And none of that was in my control. What was in my control was whether I kept shrinking to fit a version of myself shaped by other people's doubts. That night I sent one message. Not angry, not dramatic, just honest. I won't keep waiting in silence. I'm here if you want to talk, but I won't keep proving something that's already true. Then I turned my phone off. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything started to shift. Because sometimes the darkest moment isn't when you lose someone, it's when you finally stop chasing them. And in that stillness, something inside you begins to stand up. The shift didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived quietly, on a Thursday afternoon, while I was standing in line at the grocery store, staring at a display of oranges I didn't actually need. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it. When I finally pulled it out, I saw Ethan's name. Not a text. A call. I stepped out of line, heart pounding, and answered. Hannah, he said, and his voice sounded different. Not defensive, not tired. Unsteady. I need to talk to you. Can we meet? I took a breath. Yes. We met at the same cafe as before. The one with soft music and neutral walls, like it was designed to absorb difficult conversations. Ethan was already there, sitting with his hands folded, staring into his untouched coffee. He looked up when I arrived. I owe you an apology, he said immediately. That alone made me sit down. I talked to Luke again, he continued. And this time, I didn't let him control the conversation. I stayed quiet. He changed his story, Ethan said. Again, small things, details, and when I pressed him, really pressed, he got angry. My chest tightened. He said I was choosing you over him, Ethan added, that I was betraying everything we'd been through. I closed my eyes briefly. That's when I realized something, Ethan said softly. You never asked me to choose. He did. I looked at him then, really looked. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes rimmed red. He looked like someone grieving more than one loss at once. Jason was right, Ethan admitted. Luke has always positioned himself as irreplaceable. Silence settled between us, not tense, but heavy with truth. I also talked to the bartender from that night, Ethan said. My breath caught. What? He remembered you, Ethan said. Said you looked uncomfortable. Said Luke was drunk and aggressive. Said you left alone. Something inside me loosened, just slightly. And then, Ethan continued, I talked to my mom. That surprised me. She told me something I'd never really processed, he said. She said Luke helped me survive my sister's death, but he also kept me frozen in it. I swallowed hard. Ethan looked at me, eyes shining. I believed Luke because it was safer than admitting someone I trusted could hurt me, and because it was easier than fully trusting you again. The words hurt, but they were honest. I'm not here to ask you to pretend this didn't happen, Ethan said. And I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. I just needed you to know. I see it now. I felt tears prick my eyes, not from relief, but from something deeper. I didn't lie, I said quietly. I know, he replied. We sat there for a long time, letting the truth exist without rushing to fix it. Finally, I spoke. I love you, I said, but I can't be with someone who only trusts me when it's convenient. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand. I'm not punishing you, I continued. I'm protecting myself. That was the moment, the real turning point. Not because he admitted the truth, but because I chose myself anyway. We didn't reconcile that day. We didn't fight. We didn't promise anything. We hugged, longer than friends, shorter than lovers, and then we walked away in opposite directions. And for the first time since the hotel hallway, I didn't feel like I was losing something. I felt like I was reclaiming it. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in ripples. At first, it was subtle. Missed calls that stopped coming, group chats that went quiet when my name appeared, invitations that never reached my phone. People didn't confront me. They just adjusted, rewrote the narrative in smaller, easier pieces that let them stay comfortable. Luke disappeared from my life before he ever faced me again. Ethan told me later that when he finally confronted him, really confronted him, Luke didn't apologize. He didn't soften. He exploded, accused Ethan of being ungrateful, of abandoning him, of choosing a woman over family. That word, family, had been Luke's sharpest weapon. Ethan said Luke paced his apartment, voice raised, hands shaking, listing every sacrifice he'd ever made. Every moment he'd been there, every time he'd saved Ethan from falling apart. It wasn't remorse. It was entitlement. When Ethan told him he needed distance, Luke laughed, said it wouldn't last, said Ethan would come crawling back once Hannah showed her true colors. That was the last conversation they had. Ethan stopped responding after that, blocked his number, left the group chats, chose silence over chaos. And Luke? Without Ethan as his audience, his performance fell flat. Friends started noticing things they'd brushed off before. The manipulation, the volatility, the way every story centered him as the victim or the hero. When people pulled back, Luke reacted the only way he knew how. He lashed out. There were angry posts online, vague, bitter, performative, subtweets about loyalty, quotes about betrayal. He wanted attention, wanted validation, wanted someone to reassure him that he was still important. But the crowd had thinned. People don't like mirrors once they realize what they're reflecting. Ethan's family didn't reach out to me directly, but I heard through him that his mother was furious. Not at me, but at Luke. She said she'd always felt something was off, that she'd mistaken intensity for devotion because it looked helpful during grief. She said she should have protected me better, Ethan told me once, his voice heavy with regret. I told him gently, "You're not responsible for what he became," and neither was I. As for Ethan and me, we didn't fall back into each other's arms. We talked, carefully, honestly, sometimes painfully. He apologized more than once, not just for believing the lie, but for hesitating when the truth needed him to be brave. He admitted that my past mistake had made it easier for him to doubt me, even after I'd changed. I punished you twice, he said one evening, once when it happened, and again when it mattered. I appreciated the honesty, but appreciation isn't the same as repair. We tried going on a few walks together, coffee once, dinner once. Each time something felt cautious, like we were both afraid of stepping on emotional landmines we hadn't finished diffusing. I realized then that trust isn't just about knowing the truth. It's about knowing someone will choose you in uncertainty. And Ethan had chosen safety instead, so I made a choice too. I let him go. Not in anger, not in bitterness, not with slammed doors or dramatic speeches. I let him go with clarity. I don't regret loving you, I told him during our last real conversation, but I can't rebuild something that required me to disappear to survive. He didn't argue. He just nodded. Luke lost more than a friendship. He lost the version of himself that could hide behind loyalty and grief. Without Ethan as his anchor, his influence shrank. His stories stopped landing. His anger no longer felt justified, it felt exposed. And me, I didn't win. I didn't get revenge. I didn't get a public apology. I didn't get everyone on my side. What I got was quieter. Peace. The freedom to walk into a room without wondering who believed me. The relief of no longer explaining myself. The strength of knowing I told the truth, even when it cost me everything that mattered at the time. And that, I realized, was enough. I used to think closure was something another person had to give you. An apology, a confession, a moment where everyone finally agrees on what really happened. But that isn't how it works. Closure is something you build yourself, quietly, deliberately, when you stop waiting for people to become who you needed them to be. After everything settled, my life didn't suddenly transform. I didn't wake up glowing with self-love or dripping in newfound confidence. Healing was slower than that. It came in small, almost boring moments. Grocery shopping without checking my phone, falling asleep without replaying old conversations, laughing at something stupid and realizing halfway through that my chest didn't feel tight anymore. Ethan and I stopped talking completely a few weeks after our last conversation. There was no fight, just a mutual understanding that love alone doesn't fix hesitation. Sometimes it only highlights it. I still care about him. I probably always will. But caring isn't the same as going back. As for Luke, I don't follow his life. I don't check his posts. I don't ask mutual friends for updates. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to stay closed. What stayed with me most wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization that being honest doesn't guarantee you'll be believed. And that's terrifying, until you understand something even more important. Being believed by everyone isn't the same as being true to yourself. I learned that loyalty without boundaries becomes a weapon. That grief, when left unexamined, can turn into control. And that one mistake, no matter how real, doesn't get to define the rest of your life unless you let it. I didn't walk away from that relationship because I was angry. I walked away because I finally respected myself enough to stop auditioning for trust. If you're listening to this and you're in a situation where your past is being used to silence your present, please hear this. You don't have to prove your worth to people who benefit from doubting you. You don't have to stay quiet to keep the peace. And you don't have to sacrifice your truth to make someone else feel comfortable. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting to be chosen. It's choosing yourself without an audience. That's what I did. And for the first time in a long time, that choice felt like freedom.